Hi, welcome to Defense Politics Asia. Korea and Indonesia reaches final agreement over the KFX project. So this news is from the Korean Times. The Korea Times. The military of South Korea and Indonesia have reached a final agreement on the cost sharing for their joint fighter development project called the KFX, Korean Fighter Experimental. Here and the IFX in Indonesia, which is probably Indonesia Fighter Experimental. The Korean Defense Acquisition Program Administration (DAPA) announced Thursday that it had reached an agreement with the Indonesian Defense Ministry on sharing the 8.8 trillion won, 7.4 billion US dollars cost of development of the 4.5 generation fighter jet, the biggest project since the foundation of the Korean military. The cost sharing issue occurred in as Indonesia promised to pay 20% of the total development cost, but only paid 227.2 billion won, citing financial problems. And two sides have been holding several rounds of talks to solve the overdue payment since 2019. So this is the KFX model, real size model. So prototype of the KF-21 Borame fighter jet during the unveiling ceremony of the Korean aerospace industry of Incheon, South Gyeongsang province, in April this year. So from the last understood situation was that Indonesia is actually either withdraw or got kicked out of the project, and somehow actually they still managed to stay in the project. So now they actually decided to retain the cost sharing ratio, 20% for Indonesia, and the time frame of payment of 2016 to 2026. But Indonesia will provide in-kind payment for 30% of its shares, the detail of which will be discussed at a later date. I think this is something similar to what Indonesia had done with Russia, where they try to barter trade to kind of pay for some of the military equipments. So the KFX project is comprises of two phases: developing the basic fighter jet from 2016 to 2026, which we are still in this phase, and then adding advanced weapon system from 2026 to 2028. The rollout of the prototype in April this year. Ground testing is actually underway. Test flights will be carried out next year. That will be exciting to see this jet. It's like it looks a lot like a F-35 hybrid with the F-22. So it's like as small and compact like a F-35, but it has a kind of like a F-22 layout. So currently 32 technicians from Indonesia are participating in the project at the development site at Sanchong, and the number is expected to increase to 100 by the end of the year. So that's quite aggressive. So in our notes is that we are surprised that Indonesia involvement is still on, given how tight the financial situation is for the Indonesian. So this also just shows that how important this KFX project is for the Indonesian moving forward, because the Indonesians are looking at the KFX project as a vital importance for their national security for the future, because they have been very dependent on US or Russian fighters, and they have been having problems with either acquisition or maintenance or getting the missiles and everything from both sides. So for the Russian fighters that they have, it's very hard to get spare parts. So a lot of fighters are grounded, and a lot of the fighters are no longer flying. Similar problems faced by Malaysia, and I think this is a global issue for any countries that bought Russian aircraft. And then while on the other side, when they buy US fighters, they tend to be subjected to a lot of the geopolitical pressures by United States. So being able to collaborate with South Korea and have this advanced 4.5 gen fighter, this is going to push South Korea up the tax level that they are at, and that will better suit the vision of themselves as a regional power. Indonesia is a massive, huge country, in Southeast Asia. They are the biggest country in Southeast Asia, and they always see themselves as the big brother. But the lack in investment in the military had seen them lost a lot of prestige, especially Malaysia have had a few challenges with them over the borders, and Indonesia was struggling to field aircraft fighter jets to actually challenge the Malaysian jets. And actually on the Malaysian side they also are somewhat struggling a bit, but for the Indonesia it was a lot more acute. And but in recent years, especially under the pressure in South China Sea, when China has become more and more assertive militarily, we've seen a very intensive modernization effort in Indonesia. We have saw them having a new following a lot of the Singapore selections and doctrines. They gotten the Apache longbow. They got the Leopard tank, which is also what Singapore actually fielded, and they are looking a lot more better than they used to be 10 years ago. So, and with this KFX, they will be actually able to rival the Singapore Air Force. Singapore Air Force is going to get the F-35. We won't be sure how good is this KFX for now, but given that it's a new aircraft, it's definitely going to give a kind of like have a much more better balance between Singapore and Indonesia in terms of balance of power, and definitely will bring Indonesia over the edge and have an overwhelming advantage over the Malaysians. So, however, Indonesia have budgetary problems, and it is a very huge country. The expenses on the military to cover such a huge ground, and they have a lot of some insurgency issues. Some provinces, far-flung provinces that are very far away from their capitals, are always threatening to break away, and those are also, of course, definitely concerns for the Indonesians to think about. However, they cannot ignore the wider geopolitical situation that is China expanding their sphere of influence and threatening the Natuna Island and the sea around it. So with the threat of the Chinese at the doorstep, Indonesia have realized that they are actually rather stretched, and this is probably also why KFX has become such an important piece for the for the Indonesians, because if you have KFX fielded at the Natuna Island, defending the northern area, through the entrance of the from the South China Sea into the Malaccan Straits, and that part of the sea is actually controlled by the Indonesians, and having the KFX there, even with the Chinese carriers, the kind of aircraft that the Chinese can field on the carrier, they probably will struggle against the KFX. Of course, the Chinese have recently also announced a new fighter, a carrier-based fighter. I think it's the Shenyang 31, I think. But we shall see. I haven't really read a lot into that yet. But this is good news actually for Indonesia to actually be officially back on the KFX program after being threatened to be kicked out of the program, and they will lose actually all the money, the 27.2 billion won that they have already paid. So this is good news for Indonesia, and we will definitely monitor the KFX program moving forward. So please like and subscribe to the video, and do go to our website at defensepoliticsasia.com to read up about more other news.